Welcome to Catalytic Curiosity. I'm your host, Jaymes with a Y O'Farron with Catalytic Conversations. I serve remote professionals and hybrid organizations with coaching, consulting, and training to help them reconcile humanity and technology, leading to healthier, digitally integrated lives and teams. On this podcast, I am embarking on a journey of discovery to unearth the roots of digital mastery and maturity beyond mere adulting. I interview insightful and intriguing experts exploring how we can develop sage-like maturity with intention in today's digitized world. Today's episode brings coach, trainer, and speaker with Next Steps Coaching, David Swihart. I have been excited to talk with him on this podcast since before it was even a podcast. David Swihart is a dynamic speaker and presenter with over 20 years of experience. He brings a practical message presented with engaging stories, authenticity, and vulnerability. He will entertain, make you think, and help you figure out your next steps to get what you want in your life, business, and relationships. He speaks and trains on a variety of topics, including diversity, equity, inclusion, thinking, limiting beliefs, communication, leadership, personal growth, reaching your potential, and team building. David is the author of 2 courses, Thinking for the Rest of Us and Limiting Beliefs for the Rest of Us. David is an executive director at the John Maxwell team of independently certified coaches, speakers, and trainers. He is a DISC certified consultant through People Keys, and David has his Master's of Divinity from Lincoln Christian University and currently resides with his wife, Liz, and their 2 children, Elise and Sam, in Springfield, Illinois. He came together with me today. In our conversation, we talked about thinking patterns and limiting beliefs and how they connect with the exacerbating influences of environments online and how to be intentional and mature in our digital relationships. So we cover things like unfair comparisons and imposter syndrome. So this is a lot of action-packed, useful information that I really look forward to having you share your thoughts on with us after listening. But without further ado, welcome to Catalytic Curiosity. All right. Thank you so much for joining me, David. I am so excited to have you. When I was first cogitating upon this idea of a podcast way back when, you were one of the first people that popped into my head because I was thinking about maturity and how to grow with maturity and be able to be intentional about it. And when we first were networking after the Coach Connect mastermind with Jared and everybody and us in our follow-up conversations, we just gravitated naturally to those kinds of topics anyway, because you work with people to help them develop maturity intentionally. So tell me a bit about that, and then we can dive into what specific kinds of maturity are necessary online in digital environments and what that looks like. So what's your deal?
Yeah, Jaymes, thanks so much for having me today. I'm really glad to be with you. And and I love this topic because, I mean, what I look at, and as I've gone through life, what I've observed is so many people get stuck somewhere. I mean, people get stuck in a place mentally, maturity-wise. And some people never get out of adolescence. I mean, I read an article a while back and it just shocked me, but they defined adolescence. Well, here, I'm going to make you guess while we're on the podcast. What would you define the ages of adolescence if you were to take a guess?
At which time period? Like in what era? Because adolescence is a modern invention.
Today. Adolescence
right now. World. Okay, so I might have read some of the same articles. So we'll see if I'm on point or not. But functionally speaking, I would guess currently adolescence stretches from 13 to 28.
You're very close. They're saying between 10 and 30.
10 and 30. Oh my goodness. I was giving credit.
Yeah, you were right there. But
wow.
The thing is what that means is, I mean, adolescence when I was growing up, I mean, this would have been the 90s. So I'm not that old.
Yeah, it used to be like, 10 to 16 or so.
It was 10 to 16. Sometimes they would take it all the way to 21.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
depending on context.
10 years to adolescence, which means that people are maturing more slowly. People are not, quote unquote, growing up into adulthood. I mean, a new term that's come out in the last couple of years is adulting.
Yes.
Is a term that's very crazy, but it's one of the hot buzzwords for the 20-somethings and even 30-somethings. How do I be an adult?
Right.
And so having been a youth pastor, it really was a place where I was just so incredibly passionate about helping my young people grow up, helping them make choices, learn to think for themselves, learn to think well.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I noticed working with a lot of them, even my best students from the best families, struggled to figure out what they want to do with their life. They struggled to figure out how to do it once they did figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
And then they second guess themselves. They question themselves over and over and over again, had tons of doubt, tons of uncertainty and anxiety over it. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And that's
Mm-hmm.
really what led me into the speaking and coaching world. Is I said, I really want to help these young people, these late teens, early 20s, moving into their 30s, as late adolescents, if you will,
Right.
group, help them make those decisions and start moving forward. And I heard a great quote on, I think it was Instagram the other day, and a guy said, people say, well, what path do I take? And what he said was, you start down a path because the path you're looking for may be halfway down that next path you're on.
Right. Right.
And I was like, wow, what a concept.
Yes.
Because and I think that really fits well.
That philosophy for me has kind of defined my process of growth, because I would have never thought in a million years that the path that I'm on right now would be where I was going to go intentionally. I had other ideas, I had other plans, none of which came to actual fruition, but none of them were wasted, because as I was moving towards them and preparing for them and working towards those goals, that got me to a place where I could then see around the corner to pivot in a better direction. So being able to accept that is so critical.
Yeah. And so, if you're listening to this or watching this and you are kind of trying to figure out where to start walking in a direction, because you're probably not going to find the actual path you're looking for until you get halfway down this starting path.
Mm-hmm.
So take a step, start moving.
Who was it? I'm trying to remember who said it. I think it was actually Christian Simpson who said it, but he was quoting somebody else, I think, when it says that if you're trying to turn a car, it's better to do it when the wheels are turning.
Yes.
If you're trying to turn that wheel when you're sitting flat on the concrete or the pavement, it's just grinding it, but if you're just rolling even slightly, it just smoothly turns like with one finger. It makes a huge difference.
Sure. Well, and the faster you're going, the less you have to move the wheel.
Yep.
If you're going 20 and you try to turn, it's going to take longer to get around. But if you're going, on the interstate, you don't realize how much those curves. You barely move the wheel when you're around the curve.
Yep.
If you're going 25, those curves would be a whole different maneuver.
True. Very good point.
So yeah, but that's what really got me into this. And I love sitting down with people and of all ages. Not just 20s and 30s,
right.
But love sitting down with people and helping them work through their thinking, because that's where most people are stuck.
Yeah.
They get stuck in the way they think about things. They get stuck in the way they think about their relationships, the way they think about their jobs, the way they think about their education, about their intelligence, about what they're capable of. It's unbelievable to me. Some of the best people I've met. I look at them and go, wow, you've got so much potential, but they're so stuck in between their ears that they can't even see it.
And they can't bring that potential to fruition, because it says in scripture, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Like the way we think, the way we live deep within ourselves, that's where our identity can be shaped. And if we aren't actually thinking in alignment with us actually moving forward and doing things with our potential, it's as if we never had it.
Absolutely. And that's what I love to do is I love to help people unlock their thinking so they can unlock their potential. Once you start to become aware of it, and when I teach on this, when I take people through my courses and things, James, what I love to do is build the awareness. Yeah. Because even the most Pollyanna positive thinking type of people, the people who are like, everything is perfect, everything is wonderful. It's the old, Lego song.
I know some of those people. They're awesome to hang around with.
Well, even those people, when you get them down into the actual thinking processes, realize that they think more negatively than they want to admit.
Yes. I've seen this. It's true. It is very true.
And I had one of those people who helped beta test one of my courses. She was a great young lady, very positive outlook, had a lot of trauma in her background. And so she learned to think her way through a lot of it.
Nice.
She started going to the course and she's just like, oh my gosh, I do this. I don't dwell on it, but I do this. And we really helped
Yes.
bring some awareness to it, because here's the key, and
Hmm.
this is critical. Your thinking is what unlocks your belief system.
Hmm.
Okay, because the way you think is hinting at what you actually believe.
Right.
Because I mean, a lot of gurus start with the limiting beliefs. Oh, you've got limiting beliefs in you, and they talk about I'm not good enough, and I'm not,
Hmm.
and or I don't deserve, or I can't, and they
Hmm.
talk about some of those things. Well, the problem is all your thinking supports those beliefs, and so if you
Right.
don't understand how you think, you can't possibly start to deal with your belief system.
Because it's so deeply rooted, and you need to actually change those behavior patterns in your mind in order to kind
Mm-hmm.
of work back again to undermine those, creating a
Correct.
new narrative,
And
really.
it really is. And what's even more important for people to realize is once a belief is established, all you can do is malnourish it. It's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you've got an I'm not good enough belief in you, it's going to hang with you no matter how hard you try. You
Yeah.
can fill up and nourish a better root, and I'm good enough, I'm sufficient type of a
Mm-hmm.
belief. But there's always going to be times when that other root's going to pop in, no matter
Right.
how hard you
And
try.
so the key is, like you're mentioning with your Pollyanna friend, is being aware of it and then choosing where you're spending your energy, where you're dwelling on things, where you're
Correct.
investing. It's like the old adage of which dog are you feeding? It's which one you're going to
Absolutely.
bet on.
Absolutely. And that's exactly it. And if you're not, if you find your feet in the wrong dog all the time, you're going to have the bigger, stronger dog in the very wrong place.
Right. Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's kind of what's gotten me motivated and
I love
started
it.
here. And it's just, and that's why I've written my two courses. That's why I'm
Hmm.
writing a book right now.
Hmm.
Is I
You're
just
doing
want
a
to
lot of
help
amazing stuff.
people.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to help people take steps that are going to get them from here to there. I
Yeah.
mean, to help them realize that potential, to realize their contribution, and to realize that that contribution may not be, influence hundreds of millions of people, but it could be.
It could be, but it's the matter is
Correct.
like you like starting somewhere, right? Start influencing people right
Correct.
around you. Start
Absolutely.
there. So let's
Absolutely.
look at that though, because in looking at it from the digital perspective in the digital world,
Hmm.
this is kind of where
Sure.
we want to look at, what are the ways to grow maturity in online environments, and what
Mm,
are some of the really common thinking errors that we're more susceptible to in digital environments. But also, that's one thing that you just mentioned. Thinking about the people right around you when you're online, it's almost like everybody is within arm's reach, the
yeah.
toxic people as well as the non-toxic people, right?
Yes.
And so being able to relate to you, cultivating and curating your inner circle online and choosing who you're spending time with, and which dog you're feeding, also applies in those environments where which streams, what people am I listening to, what are my intake, what's my diet online, that's going to be shaping how I perceive things, is really critical.
Absolutely. Well, and here's a very first tip I would give in that moment. Before you engage with anyone or anything online, make sure you've given yourself ample time to think about a topic before you do.
Intentionality.
Correct. So if you're going
Critical.
to get online, and if you're one of those people that likes to talk politics online, we'll use a big buzz note.
We're going right there, aren't we?
We're not going to get into politics. But if you're going to get online and talk about politics, before you get online, you better formulate a very strong understanding of what you think about it, what you're
Mm,
going to say about it, and very carefully in a very appropriate place, post it. Now,
yes.
I don't even encourage doing it, but if you put it
Right.
out there, if you
Hmm.
put it out there, you also have to think on the other side. I have created a discussion that has no open conversation where we can sit there and ask each other questions and interact. And there are going to be people who engage with it on both sides of my opinion.
Hmm.
And there are going to be people who are going to attack me for my opinion.
Hmm.
And so if you cannot handle somebody attacking you for your opinion, don't put it out there.
Don't put it out there. Do not put it out there. I love that so much, because in my own research in dealing with digital burnout and things like that, so much of the toxicity specifically comes from the reactive nature of things
Mm-hmm.
online. Where as you're scrolling, as you're doing things, you're reacting to it, and it actually puts you in an addictive frame of mind.
Yep.
And so as you're lashing out in these by default, you're putting yourself in a default mode of defensiveness, and you're
Mm-hmm.
responding in a way that's not actually true to yourself. That's not true to what you believe. That's not true to the way you think. It's not true to your nature of how you normally behave with people that you care about, because there's all this anonymity, there's all these distances that are in play, and all of this reactive nature of things. And so you're just lashing out randomly. And that is so toxic. So you may be frustrated that you're responding to other people's toxicity, but you're contributing to the problem as well just by being reactive. And so setting out with a clear intention like that, with a full picture, but I also love the way you put setting intention of what you're going to do, but also setting an awareness of the responses to expect from it so you can pre-plan intentionality. That is so critical.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and just as an example, I played a game on my phone for a while that had a Discord group. Now, I'm sure a lot of your digital listeners are familiar.
I've got a Discord server.
Yeah.
I've got many Discord servers.
And so I'm sitting there, and we get into a pretty philosophical conversation outside of the game, which I mean happens in those places.
Oh yeah, totally.
And one guy and myself were going back and forth about the reliability of the Bible and the historical accuracy of it, and some of those things. And some of the other team members were more commenting on the type of conversation he and I were having over the content of it. They weren't conversation arguing. Yeah, they weren't in the conversation. They were just commenting about, they're like, wow, we would love to be in a coffee shop listening to the two of you talk about this.
I love it.
Well, but I actually said at that point, I said, honestly, what you're seeing here is two people responding back and forth, which the conversation would be so much richer because we could actually build such a better conversation in it. And my rule of thumb with that kind of posting is always, I will share a couple facts. I will share a couple of insights. I will try to listen and respond carefully to someone else's opinion and facts that they're sharing. But if it goes beyond that place of 5 to 10 comments,
right,
I'm going to see if I can schedule a Zoom call. I'm going to see if I can schedule a phone call or a face-to-face if appropriate, to see if I can have that conversation, because a face-to-face conversation gives you the ability to read facial expression, to read understanding, comprehension, annoyance. I mean, all of those things. Shut down. I mean, you can tell when somebody shuts down. I mean, their eyes glaze over, they kind of slump in their chair, and they kind of go,
they're not listening anymore.
They're done. They're done. You've lost them or you've offended them. You can't see that on a Facebook post, for example.
Right.
You can't see that in a Twitter conversation.
Absolutely. There's one of the guys I look up to a lot, Mickey Connolly. He actually wrote shameless, not sponsored plug at all, but the Communication Catalyst. Mickey Connolly, Richard Janashik. Their company is Conversant, and I'm actually hoping to get one of the guys, one of their guys that work at their company, to be on this podcast at some point. But one of my all-time favorite books, and one of the things that Mickey Connolly talks about is how there's an inverse correlation between the level of alignment that you have in a relationship and how many senses need to be engaged in that conversation. So if you have very high alignment, I joke, if my wife and I are very, very high aligned, right? I can text her half a sentence and she'll finish it for me still. Right. If I'm in like high stakes negotiations, somebody who doesn't like me, right? There's not any alignment at all. And so we need to sit down and have a meal together on the other extreme, right? Engaging more and more of the human senses, bringing more humanity into play. And so that's why I heartily agree with that. So when you're doing something, and I think time plays a factor in this. This is why instant messaging is better than emails, for example, with that asynchronous component. There's chat is like a pseudo asynchronous communication means. And so that you can get more, but it's not as good as a phone call, and it's not as good as a Zoom meeting. And there's points where I always set limits for myself, like particularly on like Facebook comments, right? If I'm going to engage somebody in a discussion, I weigh it very carefully beforehand. Okay, is there something I can actually positively add in this particular conversation? And is there somebody who's actually listening, right? And then I set up myself a limit. It's like, I'm going to present my case to this degree, and I'm not going to go further than that. I'm not going to waste my time going and getting a master's degree in order to cite all of my sources to the nth degree on this one thing to persuade this one person. Not worth it. I'm going to present my case to this point as far as I'm prepared, and then I'm going to shut up, and I'm going to be cool with that. And I'm going to be humble enough to not talk, even if he's talked smack afterwards, like, oh, I scared you off. Like, I don't care.
Well, and I think, James, you bring up an interesting point, because see, what ends up happening with a lot of those conversations is no one knows the rules of debate anymore.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, no one knows how to argue. And I mean, argue has become a negative connotated word, when a real argument is when you disagree with someone, but you have a congenial relationship with them and have that disagreement following the rules of argument.
You explore each other's positions with curiosity.
Correct. And you may not agree at the end of the conversation.
That's
I mean, one of my best friends.
But the point is to learn.
Absolutely. And one of my best friends, I mean, you know, he and I were peas in a pod thinking and beliefs wise all through college. We went to a Bible college together, but in later years, he's gone completely the opposite direction. And he and I I mean, if there's a topic, we probably disagree on it today. However, we're still good friends. We still can talk about those things. We might get a little heated here and there with a couple of the conversations, but I listen to him. I ask him about his point of view. He pretty much knows my point of view, and so he tries to argue against my point of view. But we have some really good discussions about it, and it keeps me sharp because I'm willing to listen to the other side to understand it.
Yes.
And just as an example, I mean, that's I mean, I always do this with when I am trying to get my mind around a topic. I'm not going to accept what I was told my whole life.
Right.
Now, it's not saying that what I was told my whole life was wrong, right or wrong. But like when back in the early 2000s, when the gay marriage issue came up, and there are a lot of people trying to talk about that. And again, I'm not going to talk about my viewpoint there, but what happened with that is I went, because I'm working with youth. I had half of my youth group were struggling with gender identity, with sexual identity. And so I just wanted to be able to speak to them in a compassionate, caring way to help work them through their adolescent years.
Right. You wanted to be able to listen to them in an empathetic way, connect with them.
I didn't want to come down with a hammer and say, thou shalt not. I didn't want to go there because I knew that wasn't going to do any good for anybody. So what did I do? I went and read gay literature on Christians in the church, and Christians, both positive and negative. I mean, I read Christians and non-Christians. I read straight people writing about the topic, both sides. I wrote, I mean, any combination thereof I could find, I read it just to hear the different points of view so that I could start to understand where these people, because I didn't have that identity. I didn't have that awareness. I wanted to hear from people who did and who had struggled through it, had worked through it, had studied it. And so that I could ultimately bring some things to my kids that might help them get through.
I love that. That's important.
And again, like I said, it's not here to argue one way or another type of a topic, but it's to say, you know, when we're thinking about things, we've got to move in better directions, because otherwise we've got a very shallow argument, a very shallow opinion.
We have to have the humility to be able to listen to the other side. But a lot of that sense of maturity, of the humility that allows us to be able to listen to the other side properly, requires us to be able to deal with some of our own thinking patterns and things. Because there's so many things that we struggle with in our heads that we may think like, yes, I want to listen to other people and have an open mind and think about and listen to other people. We may know that up here, but down here in our heart, our belief systems don't let us. Right. And so we struggle with that. That's what that you deal with a lot, is dealing with thinking patterns and belief systems that inhibit our maturation. And there's a few of them that you brought up earlier that are particularly relevant in digital environments.
Absolutely.
So let's pivot a bit and talk about a few of those
that
are specifically exacerbated in online digital environments.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, as I was thinking about our conversation today, one of the ones that really came up is inadequacy. Inadequacy is such a difficult place to start because most of us feel inadequate in some way or another. I mean, you know, we look at what's in front of us. We look at our maybe our job, maybe our schooling, depending on what age you are listening to this. You look at your relationships, and you just realize how much you don't know.
Right.
Well, when you get on digital, You get into all these people who are sharing stuff online, and the automatic assumption in our thinking is they're better than us. And so that creates a deeper sense of inadequacy. And all you could have is somebody who knows a lot and doesn't have any experience.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, well, and here, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was first a pastor, I was really big into reading a lot of the spiritual classics.
Oh, good.
Stuff written in the 14, 15, 1600s.
Nice.
I mean, a lot of the saints on every side of the Christian experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into reading them, and I loved reading them. I loved getting into them and learning about their disciplines, about their spiritual life.
Oh, yes.
And I had so much up here knowing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew so much about it. I understood it. And well, one book in particular, it's actually anonymous. There's not an author named, is The Cloud of Unknowing. And I love the work because the whole concept is there's only so much you can know. And what you do know is not adequate to know God. And so there's this whole principle of you have to learn to unknow what you think you know in order to truly know.
In Orthodox, I believe that we call it apophatic theology.
Yes, apophatic theology. Yeah, absolutely. And I love
absolutely.
Apophatic theology.
It's core.
But the crazy part is as you're reading this, I mean, the understanding of the concept is fairly easy. So I got the concept.
Right. But
one of my professors was on his 20th reading of this book. Okay, let that sink in for a minute. 20th reading. I'd read it once. 20th reading.
There's a very few books that I've read 20 times.
And he loved this book because it challenged him because he couldn't figure it out. Here I am sitting here going, I've got it figured out. Okay, you see where this is going?
Oh, yes.
Where this is going. I thought because I understood the concept, I had it figured out. What he realized is
the irony that this is a book about unknowing.
Correct. Exactly. And so the practicality of it was he realized that there was a deep level of personal understanding and growth and spiritual discernment and humility that went into this process. And he knew he didn't have it. Neither did I, for that matter.
Oh, yeah.
But I got what it meant.
Right.
And I look back and I kind of chuckle because, from an inadequacy standpoint, I wanted so badly to be adequate that it's like, oh yeah, I get that.
Right. You try and declare your own completeness by fiat in a sense, instead of actually going through the hard work. It's like a shortcut.
Exactly. And I mean, they say the biggest gap in life is a gap between knowledge and action.
Yes,
knowing
absolutely.
what you're supposed to do. Because I mean, okay, here we are in January. Everybody's made their New Year's resolutions, and if we're on track, most people will last 18 days. So you got about 6 days left at the recording of this
right
of this thing. If you're the average person,
right?
You need to eat better. You need to exercise more. You need to start doing this and start doing that. I mean, we all know it.
This is why coaching is a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Next year we'll try again, right? But see, that's it. In this inadequacy is exasperated online.
Yeah.
Because someone who claims to be an expert, right?
And anyone can do that.
And anyone can do that. I mean, heck, one of the marketing guys I followed actually told you to declare yourself an expert status somewhere so that people respect you.
Mm-hmm.
He actually said that in his training. And so I looked at it and I'm like, well, heck, if I am the expert, the thinking expert, that makes me more credible. Well, I'm here to tell you, I mean, even if it doesn't sell a lot of my books and courses, I am not the thinking expert. I've done a lot of research and a lot of study on it, but there are people who can talk and write and know so much more about the brain, about thinking, about limiting beliefs than I will ever know because they put their life work into it and they're older than me. It may be 30 or 40 years down the road, I might be able to claim some of that status, but they've already got it.
Yeah.
But see, it doesn't make me feel inadequate because I know that what I've learned and what I have to offer is valuable. But the thing is someone like me could put an absolute statement about thinking. Now, it could be mostly right, but it also could be mostly wrong.
True.
And so when somebody puts something out there online and you read it and go, oh, I'll never live up to that standard. Well, they may not even be living up to that standard.
Right. Right.
And so you feel inadequate because someone else said something that they don't even do.
Right. That reminds me of a story that my priest actually tells from seminary. That there was one of his teachers. He would go in the beginning of each, I think at the beginning of each lecture, or might have been at the beginning of each quarter. He told us like 10% of everything I tell you in this is going to be wrong. If I knew which 10% it was, I wouldn't say it. Right. And evidently over the years, he actually adjusted to saying, so now he started saying 20% of everything I tell you in this is wrong.
Yes.
And I love that.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what you're talking about. Having that sense of a humility to be able to not feel inadequate when still acknowledging that we're not perfect. We're not done yet.
Well, and let me transition into our next topic here with a quote, because see, the other thing is if you're just getting started with a new venture, if you're just getting started out, even like late teens, early 20s, getting started into something, I love this quote, and many people have said it. I don't know who the original source is, but don't compare your beginning with someone else's middle or end. Mm-hmm. And I love that quote because our sense of inadequacy is usually looking at somebody ahead of us and going, oh, wow, I'll never get there.
Right.
And that brings us into that second topic is comparison.
Yeah.
And comparison, when we compare ourselves to one another, it just isn't fair. Mm-hmm. It's not fair to anybody.
No,
because
it doesn't work.
No matter how you compare, if you want to find somebody, you will always find somebody better. Well, here, a little quiz for everybody. You can answer for everybody, Jaymes, because it's a really tough one.
Uh-oh.
How many people get a gold medal at the Olympics in one sport? How many gold medals in one sport?
In one sport.
If we take swimming, freestyle, race, how many people get the gold medal?
I'm going to say one for each competition.
Right, one.
Okay, good.
One.
He says it's tough. I'm like, it's a trap. It's a trap.
No, it's a simple question.
Okay.
Because there can only be one person who wins that race.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it could be a team. I mean, I understand that, that, but it's one team, one person wins that race.
And the next year might be somebody else, but there's only one person at a time.
Absolutely. But the thing is, and I mean, unless you're that person listening to this podcast, who got second in the first heat of the U.S. tryouts?
Who knows?
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Because the first person got to go to the finals. The person who got second didn't.
Right.
They might have been 1/100th of a second less than the first person.
Right.
And that first person might have won.
Yeah.
Something at the Olympics. But they didn't even get to go because they didn't beat that person in the trial.
Right. Right. Because they're all it's all so close at the top.
Exactly. Well, and that's my point is when you compare, I mean, that person is comparing in hundredths and thousandths of a second. And think what happens if they say, well, I'll just never make it.
Right.
I mean, but see, I mean, that's such an easy example compared to when you're looking online.
Right.
You look online and
you're comparing yourself to the entire world.
You're comparing yourself to the entire world. Exactly. So how did your vacation go? Let's go look at the Facebook pictures, right? And when you see all these happy people sitting in whatever location they've chosen. Well, one of my favorite stories, is one of those pictures of the family of 5 people jumping on the beach. Now you've probably seen similar pictures because they seem to be
all
really
grinning,
popular.
all happy, all their knees are in sync, sunset behind them,
Yeah. Yeah. And how many people who listen to this have looked at one of those pictures and goes, man, it would be nice to be there doing that right now. And you compare to it and you get yourself a little jealous, you get yourself a little envious, you get yourself even a little upset that you aren't going to get that vacation this year because either money didn't work out, the timing didn't work out, or whatever, right?
Yep.
Well, I heard a great story, and I didn't know the family personally, but I knew someone who knew the family personally, and they got one of those pictures, right? There's mom and dad on the end and 3 young kids in the middle. Okay, and they're all wearing white, and they're on the beach, perfect perfect picture of them smiling, all of them looking at the camera, all of their knees bent just right. And they said, if you ask the kids, they hated that day. Absolutely hated it, because they spent over 3 hours getting that picture. They didn't get to play on the beach.
Torture.
They had to sit there.
Torture.
Exactly. The kids hated it. And the parents, by the end of it, were screaming and yelling, come on, we just got to do this.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, can you imagine how tired your legs would be after 3 hours?
Oh, jumping up and down like that.
Jumping up and down.
I'm the oldest of 8, and we're trying to take family photos, and trying to get everybody just looking at the camera at the same time is hard enough, much less getting them all to smile at the same time and not make goofy faces. But getting them all to jump at the same time, I cannot imagine.
Well, and that's what I mean. Is it just? I mean, you see that picture, and it's snapped a moment in time. Mm-hmm. The rest of the vacation might have been miserable. They may not even have talked to each other the rest of the vacation. You don't know that,
right?
And that's why, like I said, comparison online, you can't compare your current reality to a moment in time snapped by a picture or a 12 or 15-second video.
Yep.
I mean, it's awesome, some of the talents and some of the things that come out online. I mean, I'm
inspirational.
Amazed. Oh, absolutely. But the thing is, don't compare yourself. Don't get yourself caught up in the thinking that, hey, I've got to be more like them. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the old type of thinking. They used to call it keeping up with the Joneses. Right. And keeping up with the Joneses simply was, you looked at the stuff your next door neighbor had and you tried to outdo them. So if they bought a new Chevy, you bought a next step above it. Mm-hmm. If they got a 46-inch TV, you got a 50. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was kind of that kind of a deal. I mean, there's even a movie out a few years ago where they made a marketing family who went into a new neighborhood, and they gave them all the latest gadgets, and they basically took them out, and their whole job was to sell all these gadgets. And they made money over the course of a year based on selling all these gadgets. So, I mean, the wife had designer stuff, and she had to convince the ladies in this upscale neighborhood to, but online now, it makes it all.
Everybody's the Joneses. You're seeing all the Joneses, the entire world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've been reading a lot on finance and wealth recently. And they said the difference between a wealthy person and a middle class and poor person is what they buy. I mean, they said middle class and poor people buy the stuff that makes them look rich. The wealthy people buy things that they can afford and that they're willing to part with money on, that they are not going to invest or use elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they say it's a huge discrepancy because, a lot of people go out and buy a luxury car or a luxury house. And I mean, I know a family here in town that, I mean, they bought a house in the neighborhood, but they drive a old beater of a car. They shop at Goodwill for all their clothing. They're just shy of food stamps as far as food's concerned. But they have the house, but there's no furniture in it. They can't even entertain in it. Oh, man. But they got the house.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my goodness.
Setting your values.
It is about your values. It's about, and see, when you make comparisons, I mean, if someone unbeknownst was to see the picture of this couple's house, they go, wow, that's amazing. And they compare it. Wow, I wish I had something like that. But then when you hear about the rest of the lifestyle, it's like,
you're not. And this cycles right into the imposter syndrome too, because I think the next one that was coming up is how big of an issue imposter syndrome, because these it's a vicious cycle that cycle right into this. And it's something that I've looked at a lot in dealing with digital burnout, because so much of the inefficacy, which is one of the 3 pillars of burnout, is the sense of imposter syndrome, where you feel like you're not accomplishing, you're not getting a sense of feedback or accomplishment because you're seeing other people around you. You're comparing yourself to other people and their successes, and you're only seeing your failures and you're only seeing their successes.
Well, and the thing is, though, is you also have to say their perceived successes.
Right. Because they're all polished.
Exactly. They're polished and reported, because that's one of my biggest arguments with a lot of the gurus. Now, some of them are better at it than others, but one of my biggest arguments is they don't talk about the hard, terrible work that they did to get where they are.
Yeah.
They don't walk you through the sleepless nights, the bankruptcies. I mean, some of them do, and I mean, kudos to them for doing it.
Right.
But they downplay them so much to make them sound like, oh, it wasn't that big a deal. Those 3 years where we, were in food lines and didn't know where we were going to sleep each night weren't that big of a deal. Well, guess what?
They'll say I worked really super hard and, put in 80 hours a week to push through and had a lot of grit and everything. And they don't talk about what that impact that had on their family or their other priorities and what that looked like and how that felt in the process.
Correct. And they don't go there. And that's why, and I mean, I heard a statistic and it was 70 or 75% of C-suite executives deal with imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because they have all of these thoughts that go through their head, and imposter syndrome is a thinking pattern. Okay. It's a mixture of thoughts. And this is, and I want to put a little bit of time here. I know we're getting close to our time here, but these are the thoughts that happen with imposter syndrome is, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this level of income. I don't deserve this office. Or if you go into relationships, I don't deserve this trophy spouse or however you might look at it. I don't deserve to be able to drive this luxury car. I don't deserve to live on this street. I don't deserve to have these kinds of friends.
Right.
It's also thinking, it comes in the form of question sometimes. Who am I to be able to do this? Who am I to be able to? And so these questions, and these are thoughts. Now, remember what I said before, thoughts are what uncover your belief system.
Right.
So let's take a couple of those thoughts and think about that. Because when you say, who am I to have this income? You're questioning, and your belief system is saying, I have a certain amount of money I deserve to make. You're saying
that's part of your identity, because that who am I question ties it directly to your identity.
Correct. And so these beliefs about your identity, I mean, these are tough, because it's moving to self-value, it's moving to self-worth. It's saying my skill set does not deserve to get paid this amount of money.
Right.
I mean, that's basically what you're telling yourself. But when I say it like that, most people go, oh no, wait a second here. But your thinking's betraying you.
Yeah.
Your thinking's betraying you. And so when you're dealing with this imposter syndrome, what you're doing is you're actually coming up against your beliefs about yourself. You're coming up about your beliefs about your self-worth, about your personal value. You're coming up against your beliefs about your skill set and your abilities. You're coming up against your belief system about your capabilities and how far you can go, your potential. And so if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, you've got beliefs sitting inside of you that are holding you back, and you are not conscious of them yet.
Right. And so would you say the key then, and kind of tying this together and possibly circling back to the very first advice you gave, that the solution, or part of the solution rather, because it's never one singular thing, for dealing with, the comparison, the inadequacy, the imposter syndrome, and all these components, particularly online, when you're dealing with such a huge exacerbation of that problem, right? Is really awareness, being aware of those thoughts and coming back and being able to look at those thoughts from almost an external view and be able to say, this is what I'm thinking. Is that right or not? And then be able to set intentionality in response to that. That goes back to the intentionality you talked about earlier, where before you go online, you set out your expectations and your plans and what your intentions are, and your awareness of what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jaymes, I mean, that is the most critical thing, because if you can learn to evaluate your thoughts, here, I want everybody to hear this, right? Everybody needs to hear this. Thoughts are neither good nor bad, positive or negative. Thoughts are neutral. I mean, there's nothing wrong with any thought that enters your head, because a thought is a thought. There's nothing been done with it. It
comes in, it goes.
So, absolutely. So even if I said the most awful thing I could possibly say, that I'm going to do this, that, or the other, that's completely wrong and immoral and all of that stuff. And I won't say any of those things because who knows who's listening, and I don't want anybody to think I'm into anything like that.
Right.
But even if I said that, the thought does not mean I have to act on it.
Right.
And even if I had that thought, to take it and say, is that a legitimate thought? Is that thought worth thinking? Is that thought beneficial to me, to my future, to my career, to my relationship? And to analyze it and say, actually, that's probably not going to get me too far, because that's probably going to land me in jail or on a potential death row if I have the absolute wrong type of thought.
Right.
And so that's not going to help me hit my life goals.
Mm-hmm.
But see, most people aren't willing to take the time to think through that.
Right.
And that is why it's so critical. And I mean, that's why I've written my courses. That's why I'm writing my book. Is most of us struggle with this. Mm-hmm. I'm hard pressed to even give a statistic on this, and you're not going to find this anywhere. But I would say less than 10% of people are positive thinkers to the point where they rarely deal with negativity. And I'm sure that number's high.
I'm sure. I might even argue that there's actually none.
And I would too. But here's the point. I mean, they may have dealt with their thinking enough and worked it through these type of processes enough that they've eliminated the effect of a lot of the negative thinking.
Right. They're not governed by them, but those thoughts
Correct.
Still enter. They still have to be dealt with. But those thoughts aren't our identity.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this and you're one of those people who struggles with severe depression and anxiety, you may be one of those people who very rarely has a positive thought go through your head. That would be the other side.
Right.
And I mean, in that group, I mean, please find the help, seek the help that you need to deal with that. I mean, I would never.
It's not something we can do on our own. We need help with that.
Exactly. But for the other 80%, you're part of the rest of us.
Yeah.
We're going to have good and bad thoughts. Some of us are going to have more good thoughts. Some of us are going to have more bad thoughts. There's systems to work through it. There's ways to deal with it. And it starts with building a huge awareness around your thinking that helps you uncover your beliefs. And once you start to uncover your beliefs, you can start nourishing the ones that you want and malnourishing the ones that you don't want.
Right. I love it.
And that is the critical piece. So, James, I want to share a favorite poem of mine to help wrap up.
Absolutely.
And it's by Marianne Williamson. It's one of my favorites. I love it. It's one that I've shared numerous times. I shared in a lot of my webinars. I shared in my course, because it just hits it so well. And one of the things we didn't talk about today, but it's a very much an underlying piece to all of this, is fear.
Yes.
And so I love this quote. I love this poem. It says this: "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, or fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. And we are liberated from our own fear. Our presence automatically liberates others." I love that.
I love that. That's good.
Because it just reminds us we have a responsibility, and that is to be the best version of ourselves. And that's why I love dealing with thinking, comparison, and thinking and beliefs, because it gives us the ability to compare ourselves to ourselves rather than trying to keep up with everybody else.
I love it. And on that note, I think that's a great place to wrap this up. Thank you so much, David, for joining me and discussing some of these really important topics that really lay a foundation for growing in maturity in digital places. I look forward to having you back again sometime in a future episode to talk more about these, because there's so much more we can explore here. Absolutely. So thank you so much again.
Yes, thanks, James. I appreciate being here. I appreciate working with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had your curiosity sparked to explore these subjects with greater awareness, or gained a valuable insight along the way. Take a look at the show notes for links for how to discover and get to know both David and myself. You can find David on Facebook at Find Your Next Step, or on Instagram at SWI80, and on LinkedIn as well with David Swihart, SWIHART. And make sure to check the links again below. Leave reviews wherever you can. Make sure to join the conversation on my Discord. Again, links in the show notes. Remember, community is the catalyst that drives lasting transformation. And I'll see you in the next episode of Catalytic Curiosity.